Hey there, my name is Brashler, and in this video, I want to show you how to do multi-track recording and virtual sound check from a computer using Reaper on the Behringer WING. Now, if you're brand new to my channel, I'm all about helping you feel more confident with your production gear no matter where you're starting from. Now, I do want to mention, over at my website at drewbrashler.com, I have some digital downloads available for purchase for scenes, effects, and channel presets for your Behringer WING. So if you're struggling getting the perfect sound that you're looking for out of your WING and are brand new to audio and have no idea where to start with a kick drum versus a snare drum, head over to that. You can check that out if that's something you're interested in. Again, drewbrashler.com. Otherwise, let's go ahead and actually dive in and figure out how to do a virtual sound check and a multi-track recording using your computer with the Behringer WING. Now, on the back of your Behringer WING, now this is the same with the Behringer WING Compact, the full size, or the rack, there is a USB port on the back of your WING. And it is a USB-B style connection. So it's the printer style square port. Now, this you can connect into your computer, and I have my MacBook Air sitting right next to me. So I have a USB-B to USB-C cable, and that can carry 48 channels of audio in and out to your computer at the sample rate that your console is. So 48K in my case. Now, this 48 channels, we can patch from anywhere. And then when it comes time to actually do a virtual sound check, we can then pull the sources of my computer back into my console for actually doing a virtual sound check. Now, what's a virtual sound check? Some of you were asking. Well, a virtual sound check is the ability to record what's happening on the stage during a rehearsal or a sound check or a full band performance. Record that to your computer in multi-track audio, and then play that back into your console as if the band was sitting up there on the stage. Now, this is super useful for training. If you wanted to get some more seat time in with mixing and practicing, maybe in not a crazy environment of a live show, maybe you're wanting to do that at your home with some near fields or in a quiet room during the week when no one is there. And virtual sound check is going to give you that benefit of being able to play all of those tracks back into the console, into the channels that they were originally set to, and then through your PA, and then you can mess with all of the settings, EQ, compression, gating, all of that stuff you can mess with as if the band is up there playing on stage. So virtual sound check is one of my favorite ways of dialing in my mix, either after a rehearsal, in between rehearsal and the actual performance, or during the week just to get some practice in. So with the Behringer WING, we have a very flexible patching system. We have our input sources and our output destinations. And so on our routing, what we want to do is we want to first label our routing. So I'm going to go to my routing page and then go to sources. Now, all of my sources are coming from my AES 50, where I have a DL32 connected, and we can see that I have my kick out, kick in, snare top, snare bottom, hi-hat, tom, floor tom, overheads, D-pad, bass, guitars, electric guitars, keys, tracks, and my vocals. Now, I want to route that to my channels, which I already have done. So we can see that if I go to my channels here, I have all of my drums for my first 12 channels. And then on my 13 through 24, I have my bass guitar, acoustic guitar. I have my electrics, synth, keys, tracks, and then on my 25 through 36, this is where I've placed my 8 vocals. Now, these are on the main input. Now, I do want to mention the WING has an alternate input. Now, this is actually a really cool feature. And this is where we can use our virtual sound check to be able to swap between the two. But before I get too far, let's actually route that same audio that I have to my channels to my computer. And so on my sources, this is where I have labeled all of my AES 50. And so we can go and click into one of these, hit rename, and we can actually title this. And I do suggest titling everything. That way it keeps it nice and easy to keep track of what you are doing with your routing. So once you have titled that, I want you to go to Outputs, and I want you to go to your USB audio. Now, this is the output page for sending audio from your console to your computer. Remember, we do need to multi-track record the audio from our performance. And so what we're going to do is we're going to unlock, and then we're going to press this +1 auto. And this makes it very easy for actually patching. Then I'm going to click into my 1, and then I'm going to go to my AES50A. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to select all of my sources that I have coming from my stage. Now, if you have sources that are broken up over multiple different source groups, so AES50A, maybe you have a DL16 on your AES50B, and then maybe you have a couple inputs on your local. Well, you want to make sure that all of the important sources that you have for your performance are going to your computer. So just make sure that route all of those sources accordingly. Now, remember, you do have 48 channels, mono channels, going to your computer and then back, but you can always pair those to make that a stereo input. So let's go ahead and actually route this. So 1 is going to be my kick out, kick in, and I'm just going to go through and assign these in the same way that I had earlier for my channels. Okay, so I have routed all 34 of my channels coming from my AES50A. Now, I know some of you are like, well, you only have one DL32 connected. That's totally fine. In the actual performance, I had a SD8 as well for getting the last 2 vocal channels, so don't worry about it. Okay, so now that we have routed the audio from my source group of AES50A to my output going to my computer, we need to hop over to my computer and actually do some stuff inside of Reaper. Now, Reaper is a DAW, or a digital audio workstation. Now, you can use Logic, you can use Pro Tools, you can use a number of different programs. All of them are going to be slightly different on how to actually route the audio, but all of them will need to have the same routing as we are going to do today. And that is 1-to-1, meaning that my input 1 on my computer, which would be my kick out, is going to channel 1. And then my channel 2 is pulling from input 2. And then channel 3 from 3, 4 from 4. And then we're going to also set up the output side of things to do the same thing. So 1 will output on 1, 2 will output on 2, 3 will output on 3. So let's go over to Reaper here, and I'm going to go ahead and add 34 channels. So to do that, I just go Command T, and we can just continue going until we get to 34 channels. And 32, 33, 34. There we go. So there's 34 channels. Now, I would suggest go ahead and titling all of these tracks. That way, when you actually hit record, the track name is the channel that you have recorded, rather than just leaving it 1 through 34. But in the case of time, I'm just going to leave it as 1 through 34 here. So the next thing that we need to do is we need to go to View, and we need to go to Routing Matrix. Once we are here, this is where the main portion of our routing is. Now, one thing that you will need to do is on master output, this is normally selected right here. So what I want you to do is I want you to press here, and then I want you to delete this. And that makes it so that the master volume and mixer of the DAW, or Reaper, doesn't accidentally send output down 1 and 2, which is by default the way that it will be. But since we're just using this for virtual soundcheck, we will want to deactivate that. So I have done that. Now, with our routing, we want to route first the record path that these channels are going to pull from. And so we can see input 1 is currently on 1, and we'll just go through and route these 1-to-1, going all the way down. Okay. And then, now this has made it so that we are taking our source group from AES50, routing it to the output group of USB audio. That's then going over that USB cable to my computer. And then I have routed all the individual channels to the individual tracks inside of Reaper. Now, at this point, I can go and I can press Select All, and then I can hit the record arm. Now, at this point, I am ready to record. And if I was wanting to record, then all I would have to do is go down here and hit the record button. Once the performance is finished or rehearsal is finished, then I can go ahead and press stop and make sure to save all. At that point, then we'll have a whole bunch of audio routed here. And so then we can go ahead and select all again and hit the record button. And now we have disarmed the record. And so then we'll have a whole bunch of audio sitting here. We'll see all the little tracks. And then what we want to do is we want to route the output of every channel back to 1-to-1 so it can come back to the board. Now we will notice that there are both stereo and mono outputs on Reaper. Now the stereo is going to pair up a stereo output with the track that you have assigned. So for instance, track 1, if I recorded this as a stereo input, then I would want it to be a stereo output. But the way that I was showing you was having everything be mono. But if you went through and selected channel 1, track 1, and outputted it to stereo 1, then that's going to output this channel 1 or this track 1 to both left and right of 1 and 2. And so in this case, for us, that's not what we're going to do. So you can press and hold Option and click, and that will remove it. So let's move over to our mono outputs here. And then I'm going to go and select output 1 as that. And then track 2 is going to be output 2. And then you're just going to go down and click all of these. Now, say you mess up and accidentally click there instead of here. Then what you can do is you can either click and then press delete, or if you have another one, you can press and hold Option and then press it, and it will just disappear. Now, once you have your setup for this set, and say we haven't recorded yet, but we set the input routing for our tracks and the output routing for our tracks. One thing that we can do is go and press File, and then we can save this as a template. So we can save this as a template for the Behringer WING. And so you can see that I have a bunch of different options as far as templates go. And I have already saved these. So say we have titled our tracks, have our input routing, have our output routing all set. We can go save it as a template. And then when it comes time to then do a virtual sound check again on a different week, we can just go and press Project Templates, and then we can press Load on one of these templates to then load that up and have all of our pre-assigned settings that we had. Okay, so I have a virtual sound check here pulled up that I recorded earlier, and I have all of these files of these audio, and then I actually want to route that back into my console. Now, this is where we come back to our routing page and go to Sources, and then go to our USB audio. This is where we want to label everything. Again, keeping everything labeled is going to be important, and making sure that you label everything correctly, and that way the routing side is easier later because you know what you're routing to what. And so in this case, I would go and click my kick out and then rename it and title it what I want to. And you can even put an icon and a color on these to copy over to the channels at a later time if you want to. Now, once we have this set, if I press play on my computer, we can see that I have audio coming into my USB audio here because it's playing from my computer to my console. And so at this point, what I would want to do is I would want to route these to my channels. Now, remember that I was saying that there is a main input and an alternate input for all of the channels on the Wing. And that's important because if I go to my channels and I go to channel input of Alt, I can then route from a completely different source. And so for instance, with this virtual sound check, I'm wanting to pull from my USB audio. And so make sure that we are unlocked with the +1 auto selected. And then here, I'm just going to go find my different channels from my USB audio and assign those to my actual channels that are on my Wing. And so we have kick out, kick in, snare top, snare bottom. And then look, I have tom 1, 2, and then floor toms, and then I have my hi-hat, and then overhead, D-pad, and then bass guitar, and acoustic guitar and electric. Now, you'll notice that some of these are already set to stereo, and that's because I already did that. If you have some stereo channels, you do need to go and link those. So for instance, here's my guitar 1, and this is a stereo channel. If this was mono, then I would keep it as 2 separate mono things. But you can title them, and then you can create the stereo pairs later. But going back to my channel routing, we're still on Alt. Here's my guitar 2, and we have synth, keys, tracks, and then my vocals are all down here. And so at this point, I have all of my channels not only routed on the main input, but I also have them routed on the alternate input. Now, if we go to Setup and then go to Audio, I can change all of my channels between the main and the alternate with this one button. But there's one piece of setup that I have to do. First, I have to go down and select into my channels, and this is where I set a global input select for all of the channels to be able to be selected between these two things. You can also do this on a channel by channel basis if you want to. So here's my kick out, and if I go up here, I can flip between my main and my alternate input just like that. But let's go to Setup and go back to our channels, and I'm going to select all of my channels to be from this global select. Once I've done that, I can press close. And then here, I can just simply switch between main and alt. And we'll notice that right here, when we're on main, it says we're on AES50A9. And then if I go to alt, it says we're on USB 9. And it says a little alt right next to the number. And that's because we have now flipped over to being on our alternate input for our channels. So at this point, we can go ahead and go over to our computer, press play, and then we have audio coming into all of our channels on our board. Now, one thing I want you to see is that this is clipping. Now that is because when this was recorded, it clipped the input. So this is one thing that you need to be careful of, is say you have set your preamp gains and you set them too high or too low. The recording side is just going to be taking the inputs directly off of the preamp level. So if you have something and you're clipping your preamp, then it's going to clip it into the recording. Or if you have it turned down too much, then it's going to record at a very quiet level. So just keep that in mind. When you are doing your virtual soundcheck recording, the preamp levels that you are setting right there before the recording starts is the preamp levels that are going to be recorded into your DAW. So there isn't a way to fix if you are distorting it in input, or there's not really a way to fix if you've recorded it too low. So just keep that in mind. Now, once we have finished doing our virtual sound check, all we have to do is go Setup to Audio and then flip back over to our main. And at this point, we're back into our show mode with all of our inputs coming from the general sources that we had them before. Now, I hope this video was helpful for you today. If you do happen to have any questions, or there's a video that you're hoping that I would make on the Wing or really any of the production equipment that's out there, please post that in the comment section down below, as I'm always reading through those comments to find videos that can be helpful for you. If you haven't already, make sure to check out my website at drewbrashler.com. Otherwise, I hope you have a great day.